Okay. Lucille, can you call me tomorrow sometime, please?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Debbie, we're ready to go. We're broadcasting.
Okay, great. All right. Thanks everyone for coming out virtually tonight. I'd like to call the Thursday, May 21st regular Board of Education meeting to order. Has everyone had a chance to review the agenda?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Thanks, Mandy. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Gretchen. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. Lucille, are there any comments from the public via email?
There were not, but let me do one final check. No, there are no comments.
Okay, we will check back at the end of the meeting for public comment. The email address is on the meeting posting. Has everyone had a chance to review the consent agenda? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Mandy. Second?
Second.
Thanks, Ruth. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. That leads us right into reports and recognition. Board's chair report, very quickly. I want to commend the Fine and Performing Arts Group at Wilton High School for putting on a virtual award ceremony last night. It must have taken a long time to put that video together, but it ran smoothly and covered obviously the fine and the performing arts. And so I think it was a happy occasion. And so congratulations to all the arts and music and drama talent that we have at the high school. It's truly legion. So congratulations and thanks, Bob. Please convey our thanks to your staff for putting that together and congratulate our talented students. And most of it celebrated the class of 2020 as it rightfully should do.
Yeah, Deborah or Bob, is that on the high school website now? The high school website to view or to look at?
I haven't checked yet, Mr. Hemmerly, but I will. They did say at the beginning of it that it's going to be public. It was on YouTube, so it'll be a public document to review and enjoy forever. Yeah, but I'll check.
Yeah, okay, good. Good. I was in the city last night. I wasn't able to watch, so I would love to see it. So, okay, thanks.
Yeah, it's a really happy video. Also, someone highlighted for me today a profile in the Wilton Bulletin of a Wilton High School graduate. I think she was in the class of 2015. She's now working as a nurse in the ICU unit at Yale New Haven High School, or sorry, not high school, Yale New Haven Hospital. Her name is Kim Ugarte. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing her name right, so I apologize. But anyway, it's truly an inspirational story and brings it close to home that we have Wilton High School graduates working on the front lines. So it's a great article to read. So I recommend, if you haven't seen it, to go search it out. So anyway, that is my report. Thank you. Superintendent's report.
Hey, just a few things. I want to just echo your gratitude. I want to start and just thank all of our parents and students and staff members for sticking with our e-learning plan. We're rapidly coming to the conclusion of the school year, and I've really been heartened by the creativity that I've seen through some of the lesson activities and the way that our teachers are reaching out to their students, but also the way that our families are reaching out to our staff and just letting them know that they are thinking about them and caring about them. And that's really been wonderful to see. So I want to encourage everybody to stick with it. You know, we are coming to the end of this school year and have a lot to think about and plan for next year, which we'll get into later, but it's been really delightful to see. So I'm grateful for that. Just a couple of notes. We received yesterday from the State Department of Ed summer school and summer camp guidance. We're in the midst of evaluating it now, and we'll share more information when we get to that portion of tonight's agenda. I just want people to understand that, you know, anyone who's watching or listening, just recognize that we're required to still adhere to very stringent social distancing requirements. So our programs are going to look very different. If we're able to run some things in person, we certainly will. And then a number of our programs will probably take place online. But more importantly, we think that the summer school guidance is probably a precursor to the guidance we'll get for reopening. And so, again, we know that we are, and people have been holding out kind of hope against hope that we'll have some kind of more normal routine, but just in the spirit of helping to manage expectations, we are very much imagining and beginning to plan for scenarios that really recognize we won't be able to have you know, full groups of classrooms and full groups of students coming back to school, that it is going to be, if any kind of reopening, a partial reopening, and then we'll also have to plan for disruptions as we respond to COVID infections, cluster outbreaks, or, you know, maybe a greater resurgence. And so school, my message really is school is going to look very different, we think, in the fall, and we'll get into those plans, but I just want to take the opportunity to repeat that for folks. And then Debbie, like you, I also, I had a chance to watch our FAPA award ceremony. And again, I was really, you know, touched by that, and was really grateful to the staff for their efforts in putting that together. And so I want to thank them for going through those efforts. And I also wanted to congratulate all of our students that were recognized. You know, we have just a world-class program, and it's always such a thrill to be able to watch them at work and to recognize our students for their tremendous accomplishments. So that's it for me, but thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure if any committees met. Did policy meet? No. Business ops did not meet. Teaching and learning? No. Okay. So,
Deb, if I may, just a heads
of course.
I also sit on the Energy Commission here in town as a Board of Ed rep, and we've begun an exhaustive and very detailed process now over the last month or so of pursuing and looking at the options and how we go about it of electric school buses. So we've had a couple of Zoom seminars on that, and we'll continue as an ongoing process. Fairfield has, in fact, committed already. And there seems to be a real push at the state level to develop a program and to try and through Connecticut Go Green, et cetera, to look at the options and try and persuade districts to move forward with a conversion to electric school buses. And I'll update you more as we go along with it. But just so everyone knows, it's in the early stages, and I'm working on it with the Energy Commission. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Right. The next item is to review and discuss the budget process. I just wanted to summarize for people listening and just how different our budget process is this year. And it's important to get out the word about providing feedback. So I think it was yesterday or the day before, there was a letter put out by Jeff Rudishauer, the Board of Finance Chairman. In it, he says the town's budget approval and mill rate setting process has changed since the annual town meeting is not being held due to COVID restrictions on public gatherings. In its place, the Board of Selectmen authorized the Board of Finance to review and approve fiscal year 21 operating budgets and set the town's mill rate. In the past weeks, the Board of Finance has reviewed both the Board of Selectmen and Board of Education budgets and the resulting mill rate. The Board of Finance has posted to the town website the fiscal year 21 budget and mill rate recommendation for review and comments from the citizens and taxpayers of Wilton. The presentation is online. The Board of Finance very clearly states that they welcome any comments that the public has if you can send it in by email before June 1st. And the email address is also on the town website. Lynn Vanderslice, in one of her daily updates, also talked a little bit about the budget, and she describes it this way, or partly this way. I'm just going to excerpt part of what she wrote. The proposed budget and mill rate calculation is available online, along with the presentation by the Board of Finance. Residents are encouraged to provide comments by emailing the Board of Finance at boardoffinance@wiltonconnecticut.org. The proposed mill rate is a decrease of 3.87%, a reflection of the Boards of Selectmen, Education, and Finance's recognition of the financial impact of the pandemic on Wilton residents and town government's need to be responsive to that impact. Later on, she also says that despite the decrease in the mill rate, the budget responsibly includes an increase in reserves for any unanticipated impacts of the pandemic. So for our Board of Education part, just to summarize, as you remember, we used part of this year's funds to ensure our Chromebook and laptop purchase for next year. That was up to $800,000. We also, with $377,000, purchased routine licenses and items that we will need next year. We then returned $1.7 million to the town. We also brought our year-over-year request, including the Genesis program, to a 0% increase. So as we all know, the Board of Ed voted on all these steps unanimously. These steps preserve our programs and our staffing levels. And this budget, plus knowing there are reserve funds should we need them, give us the flexibility and the staffing we are so desperately going to need as we face next year. So along with the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Ed is encouraging the public to send your comments about our budget to the Board of Finance by June 1st via email. Thank you. Kevin, I think I got all the steps in. If I missed something, let me know, but I think that's the process.
Yeah, Kevin mentioned earlier about receiving the summer school protocols and requirements and needs. And I think it's important that part of what we did with our budget presentation was to ask for a reserve for COVID-19 anticipated expenses. One of the requirements as outlined for summer school is that every bus must have a bus attendant or supervisor or chaperone or whatever. We operate 42 buses, I think, in Wilton. So that would mean if we go into next year, we open fully, that's 42 new positions that we're going to have to cover that were not in our budget presentation that hopefully we expect would be eaten into or eat into the COVID reserve. So there's a positive need for those reserves because this is just one piece of that puzzle. We don't know what the other pieces are going to be yet, and they're going to be significant. That's just one item that's going to have an impact on us next year from a cost perspective of having an attendant or a chaperone on every single school bus coming and going every day, as detailed by the state's requirement for summer school. And I can't see it changing as we get into the regular school year. But I just wanted to add that and say, guys, yeah, we need every penny that's in that budget and in our plan, and then some probably.
Right, thank you. And that's just one small example of a much larger puzzle that we're going to be needing to put together. One specific example, and there are going to be others. Although nothing specific has been decided on, but just the different tools and the different personnel and the amount of training and facilities and work and supplies and equipment, all of this is going to perhaps be overwhelming, but we'll talk about that a little bit later in the meeting. But thanks, Glenn, for bringing that out and pointing it out. Having a flat budget plus the knowledge that there's a healthy reserve fund in this Board of Finance presentation, gives us at least a good starting point. Okay, let's move on. We're, as Kevin said, we're getting towards the end of the year, not only in e-learning, but thinking about our year-end celebrations. We've had the one FAPA award ceremony. There'll be others coming up. And then there's other end-of-year celebrations. So Kevin, can you kind of review that for us? Which ones we can hold, which ones you know about, what's still being planned, et cetera. Thank you.
You know, I'm going to turn it over to Bob in just a second, but in working with First Selectwoman Vanderslice, Chief of Police John Lynch, we think we've come to some agreement around parameters that will enable us to do car caravan type activities to honor some of our transitioning students at least. And so in a second here, I'll let Bob, he just had a graduation committee today, and so he can update us all on graduation. I did want to let the board know, you know, we had the Hall of Fame ceremony scheduled this year, and what I'm recommending is that we just defer that to such a time where we can really, you know, do those inductees as we select them justice with an appropriate ceremony. So we're going to hold off on that one, and then, you know, we'll have some other activities that are modified just as a result of the social distancing requirements. Lauren can talk to you about some of her thinking, but she had presented a proposal for the Soaring Ahead ceremony, and it sounds like Soaring Ahead will probably stay the way that she had initially proposed, but there may be some opportunities to do some different activities with the 8th graders through one of those car caravan type activities. So Bob, do you want to talk to us about graduation, and then you have an end of year award ceremony coming up?
Sure. Well, thank you for your positive comments about the FAFA awards last night. It was a special night for mainly the students, and so thank you very much for that. We're also working simultaneously on a academic award ceremony, which will be virtual. We've got a number of presenters that have recorded their commentary and introduction of the students. Don and I did ours yesterday, actually. So we all have that to look forward to. And then Chris is working on a really nice end of year athletics banquet, virtual banquet, if you will. So those are some big things coming up that we're looking forward to. Regarding graduation and this wonderful class of 2020, we held another meeting today, a graduation meeting. And again, I would like to commend the committee again. They've been working through some logistics, and you know, it's been a bit circuitous, as I've said, but as of today, we're working on finalizing some of the details of the plan. And you know, for the public's consumption, the plan will include you know, some type of what we're calling a car procession through the town, where people will be able to celebrate the graduates, and they'll decorate their cars. And we actually started to work on mapping out the actual, you know, the route today. And we thank Lynn Vanderslice and Chief Lynch for supporting that. And we'll require some police support just to make sure we can do that in a safe and effective manner. Simultaneous to that, we worked as a committee today, and then we divided up into 3 subcommittees. So one committee was working on the car procession. The next committee was working on just the plan to have some way of, you know, distributing diplomas and acknowledging the students right near the school with an opportunity for a professional photo opportunity. So that's another prong to it. And then we're also working on, you know, a virtual graduation ceremony that would include many of the speeches that we normally have, so that at some point, in conjunction with the car procession, the students would be able to, with their families and their extended families, be able to view the actual ceremony itself, and then be able to view it in perpetuity and have it as a keepsake and enjoy it. So the committee is doing great work. We hope to communicate out some more information in the near future, because that's been our goal after each meeting, and we will do so. So we're starting to really work on some of the final details, and whatever we do, we're going to be very, very, very proud of the class of 2020, and I think they're going to be acknowledged very well by our school and our school community and by our town.
Great. And just so we're really clear on the process here, what First Selectwoman Vanderslice has asked is that we compile all of our respective plans. So graduation, we have a proposal from Cider Mill to do kind of a car caravan drive by where teachers would be parked in their own cars and wave at the kids. And then a couple of other odds and ends. So we're going to compile that into a single document and transmit that to her tomorrow so she can review it herself. She can have Ira Bloom review it just to make sure that as we're considering these various options, they are in compliance with the governor's executive order. She'll have Chief Lynch review for those logistics because as you just heard Bob describe, we're certainly going to need to coordinate with the police, possibly with CERT, just to manage traffic flow and things like that. And then of course, Barry Vogel, our health director, has to put his imprimatur on it. So we're hoping we can put that information in front of them tomorrow afternoon, and then get some conclusions and the go ahead sometime later in the week, next week.
All right, thank you. Very ambitious and I think creative. Any comments or questions from board members?
Will the diplomas be given during the drive-through, or diplomas at a different date? Bob, for the
Yeah, there are actually two ideas that we're still trying to finalize, Mandy. It may even involve giving out the diploma cover during the procession, the car procession, which was one of the main ideas today. But also then separate from that, an opportunity to get your photo taken with the diploma, and maybe something beyond the car procession, something equally ceremonial at or around the high school. So we have a couple of options actually on that.
Right. We just have to, we're complying with the social distancing requirements.
Do you have a timeline for when the plans will be sort of finalized so people can really jump into the details and the putting the fun part into it? Do we have any sense of that if it goes over to town hall and Lynn and police and fire? Do you think it'll be finalized by next week sometime, or?
That would be my hope, but I think that's, I think I'd defer to Lynn on that, and certainly
Sure.
call her after I send her the list and just get a sense from her what she thinks is realistic.
Okay. Bob, have you heard feedback from, I know your committee includes parents and students. Are they feeling okay about this three-part component, three-part graduation?
Yeah, the committee really is. It's been a very inclusive committee, and the students certainly have been, large leaders in the process. But as you could tell, it's just been a very unusual, year and process. And
Of course.
it's taken longer with a few of the changes that have been brought to the fore with us. But we left today's meeting, I think, with some enthusiasm, saying, you know what, we're at the point where we're going to look at the final details and get them down on paper, share them as a draft with Dr. Smith and First Selectwoman Vanderslice, and we're going to get excited about it now. And I think that's what we really need to do. I think that our staff that have participated on the committee are beginning to see that this is coming to fruition, and the kids are realizing, you know what, we're going to be able to do something. We're in a much better place this week than we were last week, and I think it's time right now to really get excited about what we reasonably can do and appreciate that it's going to be something monumental for these kids, albeit different.
Okay. Right. And let us know what the Board of Ed can do to help.
Bob,
Yeah,
just curious, what's the next step? Are you waiting for the town to review the plans?
Well, our goal right now as of this afternoon is to finalize our draft, which is going to be, frankly, even a little bit of a feat within the next, 12 to 15 hours or so to get it all down, because we were delayed a little bit. But our goal is to get a reasonable draft to Dr. Smith tomorrow, which we will do. And then we'll wait for approval from the town and that review process, and we'll be ready to proceed.
And how long do you think the town review process will take? I'm just wondering when we can tell families what the countdown is on now. I feel like you guys have less than a month.
It's hard to say, I know all those folks are totally loaded up, but I think in all the conversations that I've had, I think, it's fair to say that, Lynn and John and Barry, and I'm sure Ira too, all recognize, the importance of this and a sense of urgency. And so I'm sure that, they'll give it their first, make it their first priority when they receive it.
Any other questions or comments? All right, well, a huge project, Bob, and thank you for your leadership. And as soon as you either get the written plan and or the approval, could you send the board copies as well?
Yes, we will. Absolutely.
All right, and please let us know what we as a board can do if there's anything that we need to do. We're right here. So thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your support. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So summer programs. Kevin, I know you talked about the state guidance, and I know the board members got copies as well. Very detailed. To Glenn's point of advice, guidance on buses and classrooms and number of people in classrooms and all sorts of things. So I know our summer programs include ESY. And then some optional programs put in by continuing ed. So do you want to update us as to what our thinking is? Are they possible? What should we expect?
Right. So we are, we just, as I mentioned, we just got the guidance yesterday afternoon. So we're evaluating it now, and I think the question is, can we run programs live and reasonably preserve the health and safety of students and staff members? That's going to be, if the answer is yes, then we'll run some kind of program live. If the answer is no, then we'll relegate to virtual programs. And just to top line some of the considerations within that guidance. So not surprisingly, group size is restricted to 10. So it's, 10 students per one adult. We have to, in any, organization, we have to maintain 6 feet social distancing between, kids and each other and their teachers. All participants are required to wear masks unless there is a medical reason that you can't wear a mask, or there's some purpose that you need to remove the mask. And then, of course, you have to manage the 6 feet of social distancing. There's also a requirement for, kind of visual health screenings and temperature checks. And then in terms of transportation, if we're going to be transporting kids on buses, as Glenn noted, not only is there a requirement for a bus monitor for every bus, but kids have to be staggered in such a way as they are as far apart as possible on the bus. And so, that just the social distance requirement really dramatically reduces the number of kids that we could transport on any single bus. So, I think the good news on that note is, we have a practice of our parents driving our kids to a lot of, certainly to school and to a lot of the other events. So those are kind of the high level considerations that we have to manage. And then, thinking about what the physical infrastructure would be in the building to maintain social distancing, what kind of, plexiglass barriers and things we might need to temporarily erect to, again, further support health and safety, are all things we have to sort out in very short order. I know Andrea has a long list of questions that she's harboring. So why don't I pause and let Andrea kind of weigh in here with her own thoughts.
Can I just ask a quick question before Andrea starts? How large is our summer school program?
Great question, right? I mean, if you talk about, ESY is even, hundreds of kids, right? And so when you factor in continuing ed, it's hundreds upon hundreds.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And is it run out of on a normal time and place? Is it run out of every building, or is it consolidated into facilities?
Yeah, well, remember over the last several years, so, there were a period of years where Miller Driscoll was unavailable because we were remodeling.
Mm-hmm.
We took Starter Mill offline because we were doing all of the work. And so consequently, some buildings weren't available. All things, and then, this year had things, been kind of normal, we would have shut down Middlebrook because we wanted to do all of the renovation work there. Okay. So we do spread our programs out, and you think about like your own kids, the littlest ones at Miller Driscoll. That's where all the small child sized furniture is. So we would run programs there. Sal Gimo has run his sports summer camps out of Miller Driscoll for a number of years. So we do access all of our buildings that are available. And I think that's one of the major considerations is in the needs of social distance. How would we prioritize? And so if we were going to run both ESY and a continuing ed program, my initial thinking is we would probably run ESY out of Miller Driscoll. And then maybe if we were going to run some continuing ed programs, maybe out of Cider Mill or Middlebrook. But that's really up in the air at this point.
So good evening, everyone. As Kevin said, we received the guidance yesterday afternoon. My team and our ESY folks have been digging into the document and taking a look at that against the students who have been recommended to receive extended school year services. We're taking a look at what do those parameters mean to us, and how could we make those parameters, or could we make those parameters work, and provide, part of our looking at it says what impact will the parameters have on the quality of instruction done in a face-to-face context. So, for example, some of our more complex kids, being 6 feet away from their teacher is going to be very difficult. And so they need to be taught up close. And so we'll have to take a look at,
Did we just lose Andrea?
It looks like we did. There she is.
Here I am. I'm here. Sorry, my Wi-Fi went out.
Sorry.
We will have to look at enhanced PPE for some of our staff we're working with, our most complex kids. I had some communication with Barbara Shum today, since I am not well versed in the vendors for PPE. Barbara was great and gracious in helping me see where to go to take a look at where to get some of the equipment and PPE that the staff will need in order to do the work we need to do in ESY. Right now, we're not having much luck finding vendors who have PPE available to us. A lot of back-ordered things happening. We're looking at developing the protocol for how to take temperatures and do wellness checks on the way into the building, or whether or not we might even do that on the way into a bus. So we have to think about who those people would be, what training they would need in order to make that a valuable endeavor. We also have to think about a way to isolate a child who might become sick, or a staff member for that matter, who might become ill during the course of the ESY day. So we have to think about how to manage those kinds of things. And then we have to balance all of those things on, will doing all of those things have a negative impact on the quality of instruction and the instructional program that we're able to give in ESY. So we are deep in the weeds right now. We have more questions than answers, but the guidance gave us some parameters that we can now start to bounce specific protocols against. My hope, I know the parents are anxious. We are anxious too. My hope is that we have an advisory group, a parent advisory group who've been working with us on ESY issues all year long. So we're going to call them into service early next week and run some ideas by them and think through some things out loud with them. And then our hope would be to have a full parent forum, similar to the one we had a few weeks ago, just to talk about ESY, to talk about what we would have to have in place, and to get a sense of the community in terms of We fully anticipate that there will be some families who do not want to send their children to live ESY, and we have to think about how to meet their needs in a virtual environment. So almost running parallel programs, which is a challenge in and of itself. And then we have to work with our staff to see who is willing to come into live teaching right now, and who would prefer, we've done some initial talking, but now that the guidelines are out there, we need to go back to them and talk about those who continue to be willing to come in and do live teaching, and any parameters they might have in terms of their own home situations. So it is a very, very complex process, and operationalizing those parameters that were given to us yesterday by July 6th will be a Mount Everest size challenge. So I just want people to understand that getting it ready for July 6th in this time frame will be quite a challenge.
Andrea, is there buses during ESY?
We do provide transportation to our students with disabilities, so that will also be a piece of the puzzle. We'll need to make sure that we can staff bus aids, as Glenn mentioned, that are a requirement. Either we'll need to staff them or the bus company will need to staff them, so we'll need to see and work with the bus company. I haven't gotten to the bus company people yet, but that will be an issue to see whether or not they have sufficient staffing to staff bus aids. And we also have to talk about the training they'll need to be able to make sure that students socially distance, and students with disabilities who may have challenges with wearing masks for long periods of time. We're going to need to do some real work around that.
Andrew, just a quick question. Does it make sense to maybe make a first run at parents to see how many parents, no matter what provisions you put in place, have no interest in doing this? It just
I do think it's important for us to see it. I can't, I guess I'm wondering, I don't have a good answer for whether or not parents have any obligation to, they could, we have to be prepared for everybody to want to be live. Then we also have to be prepared to accommodate those who don't want to be live, and that they can change their mind in the middle and call on a Monday and say, we want to come back. So it's the IEP rules the day, and as close as we get to the IEP, that's where we're going to have to go. I do think there's going to have to be some, we're going to have to make calls to each and every parent and talk about where they are and meet them where they are. And that's kind of the next step. First and foremost, I don't know if we can do that until we know we can actually go live at all.
Right.
If we can go live at all, then we'll start making those calls and talk to parents about those who may want to remain in a virtual environment. The other piece we may do, and we've been talking about, is looking at it in terms of the needs of the student. So some students may need to be live, while others may be benefiting quite well in the e-learning environment, and we just might leave. So we can reduce the numbers of kids and staff in the building by the need to be live versus doing e-learning. So, in all likelihood, if we go live at all, it will be a part of our population, of our students, not all of the students.
Right. Okay.
Andrea, would Genesis continue to operate during the summer in any way, shape, or form, or what happens with those students?
Our plan in the budget was to make Genesis an 11-month program and have the students attend and participate through the month of July. Right. That was the plan going forward, if all things being equal. I have a meeting with the Genesis team to think about how we can, the Genesis kids have a lot of momentum right now, and we don't want to see that momentum fade. No, so we'd like to do some work over the summer with them, but we're not sure what that's going to look like yet. So I'll be meeting with the Genesis team this week, or early next week, and we'll come up with a plan for how to continue on in some of the work we're doing, whether it's live or partially live, and some of the e-learning work.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I ask a question about the PPE? I'm just wondering, what's the relationship with the state and/or the health department for individual school districts to try to go out on the market and find things that are effective and reliable and vetted and all of that stuff? Does anyone know if there's any state purchasing and/or local purchasing, for us as a school district to figure out the suppliers for PPE seems something that we would need to partner with someone else on. That's just my initial reaction.
Yeah,
I agree with you. And we've heard that the state is talking about doing some large scale purchase of PPE. I haven't seen it connected to individual school districts yet, but that may very well be the case. We just, I just went out today to see whether or not some of the things like disposable thermometers, or the different kinds of thermometers we could use to do temperature checks, those kinds of things would need to be purchased. Whether or not the state is purchasing them in bulk for the districts, I don't know. If they are, we haven't gotten wind of that yet.
Okay, well, there's 169 at least towns all going out on the market trying to look for things that may or may not be reliable. You're not no offense, but you're probably not the thermometer expert, as to
not my skill set, right? Yes. Yes, I would gladly not become the thermometer guru if I could avoid it. I have been talking to other colleagues in the surrounding area. And so we meet regularly to talk about issues like this, so that we can see what partnerships we can create. And we're meeting again tomorrow, actually, to talk about the ESY guidance and share what strategies others are using. So we'll gain some more information that way. But, I know how important it is for parents to have all the information they need as soon as is humanly possible. And so our goal will be to communicate with the families, gain some insight from them, and then communicate some definitive answers within the next week, 2 weeks at the most.
Okay, thank you. Other questions or comments? Just looking at a summer program is just, I don't want to say it's an experiment because that's not the right word, but it's kind of a precursor for the larger school opening in September. So in one way, perhaps it's good to start asking these questions sooner than later. But what an overwhelming task. So thank you, Andrea and Kevin and the whole staff. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, Deborah, I think it's incumbent upon the state to do whatever's necessary to be able to be the resource for all the PPE requirements. We've got thermometers, we've got masks, etc. But to leave all of the school districts in the state to their own devices is really not a good position to be in. Suppose we can't get enough thermometers before school opens. Then what do? We don't open school.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
It's crazy. So the state has got to really step up and solve this problem, I think, for all of the schools in the state. Be the resource for us. Not in my mind.
Yeah. All right,
I agree with that, but also I think realistically, it's probably, a good time to start also gaming out the corollary of that not being the case. So,
no doubt. It doesn't mean we don't stop doing our own thing, but still to be consistent, to make sure we have the right devices, the devices that meet the requirements that the state has laid out. I mean, the state is doing this to us. They've got to be a partner in this process. There's no doubt in my mind. And if they're not going to be, then that's really not a good thing.
Right. Or at least the local health department. And again, you know, I don't know, that's also a huge challenge, but just being a responsible agency to buy the correct equipment is, you know, let alone a market, let alone find the market for it. But just to be sure that, you know, we're buying the right thermometers or the right masks or, you know, that meet the standards.
We don't do anything in that domain without Barry Bogle and Barbara Shum and our town doctor. We don't do anything without without their stamp of approval on any of those purchases.
Right. All right.
They are a part of this team, and they're absolutely an integral member of the health and well-being side of this team, and we don't do anything without their approval.
Okay. All right, I guess more to come.
More to come.
All right, thank you. Anything else, Kevin, on summer programs?
You know, I think as Andrea was describing, you know, all of those questions and considerations apply to ESY. So, you know, once Dolores has had a chance to really digest what those parameters are, she and I will probably connect again tomorrow, and we'll just, you know, assess the feasibility of what we can do, if anything, in person, and what we can do remotely. And I think the other, just the you know, the concern that we're trying to also manage and respond to is the need for parents to go back to work and then to provide some childcare. And of course, you know, so many of our summer school programs have, you know, serve a childcare function as well. And so I just want you all to know that, you know, we're sensitive to that as well as we're trying to sort out what it is we think we can do safely.
Are we coordinating or at least keeping an eye on what the town is doing in Parks and Rec?
Yep. So I shared that, you know, Steve Pierce had some, you know, he was looking at the guidance that's in place for the childcare centers. I sent him the summer school guidance when we got it yesterday. And, you know, certainly, you know, he's thinking the same thing just in terms of trying to provide programs that are meaningful for kids, but also going to serve a need that parents in this community have. So we are, we have been in touch and we will continue to be in touch.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? All right, thank you. All right, that brings us to Board of Education reentry considerations and roles. I asked Kevin to put this item on the agenda. He had shared a video message that he made to the faculty with board members. And in it, he asked the faculty, and I'm not quoting directly or correctly, but one of the messages was that he was asking faculty to take a breath, to think about what next year will be like, and to reflect on what that would require of people. So I was struck with that as I was listening to the video, and I thought that really is something that's a good sort of exercise for board members to go through. So I wrote all of the board members, all of you, anyone who would like, to talk a little bit about what you individually see as working as a board. What attitudes should we bring to this? What skills should we put to use? What are our roles? What are our hopes and expectations? So just sort of taking a breath before we plunge or dive into the reopening process. Andrea's given us just a tiny glimpse, and I know we'll hear another report right after we talk. But I just thought as board, you know, like there's 6 of us, we come with slightly different perspectives. So what do you see are sort of hopes and expectations? What do you think the attitudes are that we should be exemplifying? What are the things that we can do, the most important things as a board we can do to support success for next year? So we needn't take a whole long time, and this is open to all board members who would like to weigh in just for, you know, a couple of minutes and give us your thoughts. Not sure if I'm going to get a volunteer to go first or not, but it would be nice.
Yeah, I'll go first. I don't mind.
Wait, Glenn, I think I saw Jen's hand
Okay.
first. Do you
Go,
mind?
Jen.
Sorry, I was
Couldn't get
smiling
off
at
mute
her.
fast enough. I was so
Sorry.
excited. I did take some time to think about this, and I think I have two hopes, if you want to put it that way. First would be the safety, that getting our kids into school in some way that keeps us as healthy as possible. And my second hope would be to teach our kids in a way that minimizes the likelihood of greater gaps. And I think my point to that would be if we end up back in some sort of an e-learning atmosphere, that trying to have a better balance between real-time teaching and independent work. Those are my two hopes.
Thank you. Well said. Glenn.
Yeah, I think, boy, as we go through this and think a lot about it, and we do have a lot of time to think about it, let's just be both patient and positive. You know, I think that we need to have a great deal of patience because there are going to be a lot of trials and tribulations as we begin and go through this process, particularly of reopening. And positive in any message that we have and that we send, particularly to our students and to the children involved. And then the second thing I thought about is that as a board, to let everyone know, and particularly Kevin and your staff and the system, that we're available. I mean, we're here if there's anything that we can do to help or be of assistance or to be available or to do whatever, we're there and we're with you and we're in support 100% of all the steps that we take because we're a small board. We're not as big as some mini boards, but we're here. And don't be afraid to ask of us if you have a need or if you have a want or something that you think we could help you with. We're here for you. Okay. So those are my two: patience and positive, and that we are in fact available and to help you in any way we can.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So,
Go. Yeah, Gretchen.
well, I guess obviously our children being safe, but I really think that as a board, we also need to be flexible. I guess that kind of falls into the patience, but we can come up with this wonderful plan and there might be a hiccup somewhere because all of this is so new to everybody, just like it was in the spring. And I think that we as a board need to make sure that we can come back and scramble and work something else out or be here for Kevin or for the administration to readjust and to have our time available for them and any feedback that we can get from people from the town or that we'd be open to. So just, it's not the same board work that we were doing last year.
No, thank you. I don't think any of us imagined this. Like we're going to talk about thermometers and yeah. No, thank you.
Deb, I'll go.
Thank you.
It's like putting together a 5,000 piece puzzle blindfolded. That's what the analogy that I keep going, and we don't even know what the puzzle is of. I think so important is consistency across all ages of all levels of students and making sure that we maintain the consistency. And also communication. Gretchen just said it. We would love to, we don't have all the answers. Kevin doesn't have all the answers. No one has all the answers. And the more input we hear from the town and the community and parents, I think would be great. So please, for anyone who's listening, email us your thoughts, your questions. Communication is so important now. And my other only thing is just the mental wellness of our families, of our students, and also especially our teachers. I think that's something I think about all the time.
Great, thank you. Good reminder. Ruth?
Going towards the end, there'll be a few things that I'll echo. But, my hope is that first and foremost, we go through this, like Glenn said, positively and assuming the best of people and their intentions. and working from there. And that we're putting the health and safety, like social, emotional, and physical of our children, our families, our community, staff, always at the forefront of what we do. And as a board, I think I see it as incumbent on us to be kind of stewards of the big picture. You kind of be able to, ensure consistency across the district and within schools and within classes from both organizationally and academically. And, to foster resiliency and flexibility, and to know that September is going to look different, and it's going to look different than what May was, and that it's going to be different from March 11th, even with just a few extra health and safety measures. And that I think we need to communicate the realism to some extent of what September, without, again, like Mandy said, without, being blindfolded and not having the pieces of the puzzle, also being able to say that it's not going to be like anything we've experienced so far, but that, to some extent, like Wilton as a town and as a community and as a school community, we rose to the challenge of the emergency. And now I think that we can rise and adapt and innovate to the challenge of, September, where it's going to be new partnerships and new paradigms and blended of home and school, and adapting and adopting our practices on an ongoing basis, and looking to families in the community to, to provide us with their assessment so we can have real-time learning, and also, be prepared for in ways that are better and for our kids.
Thank you. I'm somewhat struck by the fact that many of us have the same themes emerging, which I actually think is a good sign. I'm looking at my little list, and you all have said them all. So I had the health and safety. I didn't use the word positive, but I used it. I think it's important to view this perhaps as an opportunity. There's plenty to be overwhelmed about, but if we see this as an opportunity that once we get into it or into the other side of it, that we're going to come out stronger and be more adaptable and able to face the next crisis, whether it's another virus or, something else. We'll be more robust because of this. So that will take creativity and turning things upside down. I was talking to Kevin about, I've lived here for, I can't remember how many years, but the message from the schools has always been, you don't need to have your kids drive to school. You don't need to drive your kids to school. Just take the bus. And now we're probably going to say the exact opposite. So we just have to sort of get used to some of those things about, oh yeah, I guess maybe not so much. And then as a board, trying to, I think somebody used the word, the systems, try to help navigate from this sort of system level. So what we're doing is good for, kids, all kids as a whole. Even though there may be some individual likes or dislikes, et cetera, but we can't leave any kids out. We've got to kind of look at it for a system. And I am looking forward to next year being stronger, less in the emergency mode and more in the, okay, if online learning is now a fact of life, we don't know how much or what the balance will be, but my guess is it will be some blend. So how can we add the academic rigor and maintain the mental health piece going? So we make progress. Thinking about our littlest students, trying to learn how to read, we absolutely can't fall down on that. And then we have a different kind of a partnership now. We've always said, we partner with the parents and the faculty and the students, and that partnership, the roles are changing and they're more active. And so the extent to which we as a board can help all those constituents engage fully and recognize that parents are doing a little bit more and students are being a little bit more independent, and teachers have to think, with 2 or 3 different hats on in modes of learning, that we, just recognize that our roles are changing. Again, we're going to be sort of embarking on something completely new. There's no path that we can look backwards on and say, oh, let's do it like that. So it'll take courage as well. So anyway, thanks for all your thoughts. And I made a list, and we can go back and refer to them when we get overwhelmed or impatient, and say, oh yes, they'll sort of be a little bit more of our inspiration and some of our guideposts. And we have an excellent leadership team. And so our last item on the agenda is to get an update on where we are on the district planning processes and organization and committees. If we could just get an overview, and I know at least one of the committees had a first meeting. So Kevin, are you going to fill us in on that?
Yes, I am. So a couple of things as we get into that. First, I just want to say I appreciate each of your reflections and hopes and aspirations, and know that I and the district leadership team for sure, because we've been speaking about it, and I'm sure many, if not all, of our teachers also share the same sentiments. Health and safety is a first priority, and as we're trying to put some structures in place, we're also thinking, very heavily about how can we be better? Because we do know, while we might turn around and look kind of wistfully at, what was, we know that our traditional system, like every traditional system, here in the country, doesn't serve all kids. And so we had gaps in the way that we had been doing things. And so, while it's in moments hard to imagine, I share the sentiment that this is a real opportunity to better serve many of those kids that we were underserving in our traditional setup. And, really that is one of our commitments. And I think, the commitment I've made that's part of that, we have built an emergency e-learning system that's getting us through now, but it is absolutely not sufficient for what's going to come. And I am committed, and I believe, because we certainly have the talent and the intellect and the resources here in this community among our staff and with our families, to do the work of teaching and learning in our public school system far more effectively, given some time, some additional tools, and some planning and training. And so know that that's a shared commitment among the staff, certainly among the leadership team. And we're going to deliver on that. We're up to the task. I'm positive about that. The other piece I would just offer, Fran and I had been talking, and we've been working with a couple of different faculties on a learning management system in Schoology, which we're going to hear about in a minute. But she shared with me this idea, Debbie, and you referenced it, about our relationships. And she said, teaching has really changed. And I had talked about teaching going from being a private act to a very public act. And she kind of said, it's not only just a public act, it's also it's a team sport now. And we rely far more heavily in this environment on our kids, but also on our parents. And I really appreciate that idea, resonated with me. And I think, again, just thinking about the opportunity to invest differently and to support our kids and to invest differently and support our families, we have an opportunity to really strengthen those partnerships and really think about this in a completely different way as a team effort. And just, the simple transition of, teaching as a single act versus teaching as a team act is a complete paradigm shift and opens up a whole different way of imagining it. And so that kind of opportunity and possibility excites me personally and gives me lots of energy as I'm thinking about the very daunting task of what reentry is going to require. So on that note, I'll summarize briefly for the board, and then we'll get into some more details. As we shared with you the last time we met, we laid out a plan that Chuck presented to you that really addressed 9 goals. So the first goal was to develop a plan for deciding if and how and when and for whom schools could be reopened, and also, a plan for needing to close should we need to close. The second goal area was to develop a robust learning management system, which Fran will speak about momentarily. We need to develop a plan for determining what students know and are able to do academically when we return in the fall. We need a plan for adjusting the curriculum based on our diagnostic assessment of where students are and what they know and need to know. We also need to develop a plan for refining or reimagining the process for identifying students in need of remediation, as well as how they're going to be served. We need to develop a plan to promote the wellness of our students, teachers, and parents. And I'm so glad so many of you spoke about your concerns about just individual well-being. This time has been so disruptive and truly traumatic for some, and we need to have a different plan to support those who are struggling the most. We also need a plan to support our high school students in pursuing their post-secondary opportunities, a plan for developing a system of coordination and communication among the various stakeholder groups, which you had also referenced in the early part of your conversation, and then developing a staffing plan that supports the changes in the learning environment and educational delivery model, taking into account that range of scenarios that we've been contemplating. So we have various people assigned to those different goal areas. I'm going to just very briefly walk you through where we are with goal 1. That committee is co-chaired by Andrea and me. I want to thank Ruth and Mandy for participating yesterday. And we'll just kind of top line where we are with that. We're at the very beginning stage. Chuck is either chairing or co-chairing a number of the goals. He's not able to be with us tonight, so when he returns, we'll ask him for an update. Fran will provide us a very brief update on our work with the learning management system. That's been very positive and productive. And then Maria is responsible for several goal areas, and she'll update us as well. So I'll share my screen with you for a moment here. Just open that up. Great. So we developed a discussion guide for our that first goal area, and the goals in that area were to develop a plan for deciding if, how, and when schools can reopen, a plan for deciding how and for whom schools would reopen, and then a plan for deciding how and for whom schools will close in light of a COVID resurgence or individual outbreaks. So we created a discussion guide, and the committee that's participating, in addition to the 2 board members, we have a number of teachers from each of our schools, as well as a number of parents. We've invited Barry Bogle, who wasn't able to join us yesterday, but will be present for subsequent meetings. Chrissy Mackin, who is a pediatrician and is our medical advisor, and then Barb Shum, who's our director of nurses, are all participating. And we'll be meeting weekly as we move forward to hash out these plans. So just very briefly, a couple of assumptions. We're, I think, reasonably assuming that we're not going to be reopening in the same fashion as we had in the past. It certainly is not going to be business as usual. And there'll be some significant guidance that we'll need to adhere to in terms of responding to health and safety concerns in light of COVID-19, some of which we've talked about tonight. So what we tried to do here was just take all of the individual considerations and then break them down by category just to facilitate the conversation and make sure that we were being thorough. So I'm going to scroll through this and I'll come back to the top. So, the first broad concern is around addressing public health risks. The second is considering, economic hardship on families. The third is impact on student learning. The fourth is, what are the new health and behavioral norms that we'll have to institute and train to. The fifth is concerns around physical infrastructure. And then we have transportation, food services, scheduling and staffing, and then some further consideration about various models for reentry involving different groups of students. So the conversation yesterday was really an introductory conversation, and we didn't get terribly far. I expect that we'll pick up steam as we continue to meet. But in terms of, and again, I'm just going to top line, I'll share this document with everybody so you can all read it at your leisure. But some obvious health and safety measures that need to be in place. So masks, health screening, social distancing, monitoring of cases in the community, providing for contact tracing and really tracking patterns of illness. So, you know, we need to take action to ensure kind of each of those pieces is in place. We need to develop specific plans. And then we also need to tend to secondary considerations. So, you know, by simple example, if we are not using the cafeteria because we're adhering to strict social distancing guidelines and students are having lunches in their cafeteria, then as a secondary concern, we also need to be mindful of various food allergies and tend to that. And so that list will continue to grow as we dive more deeply into that. But you can see just the level of detail that's present here. And I would just, you know, remind everybody, this is just the first goal. So certainly being very conscientious about all the steps we have to take to ensure the health and safety of students and families, being cognizant of those that are high risk, addressing and naming very specific criteria in terms of what pieces have to be in place in the building, PPE, physical distancing measures, other physical barriers, cleaning routines, etc. This committee began the conversation yesterday and got into the weeds very quickly, and we will continue to meet weekly to flesh this out. The deliverable here, once we kind of work through each of these pieces, will be to take all the input and craft that input into an action plan, which, you know, we'll then implement. So that was the beginning part of goal 1. I'll just stop for a second and look for comments, questions, and then we'll move on to some of the other representatives to speak to those other goal areas in the progress.
Yeah, Kevin, so this is the state committee that you're on?
Oh, Glenn, this is our local district committee. The state committee that I was on really finished its work, and its task was to work in a regional group to evaluate the broad survey feedback that came from constituents across Connecticut, and then to you know, just generate questions and concerns. So, you know, everything that we've laid out here was certainly reflected in that statewide feedback and document that we examined in that other regional committee.
Okay, all right, thanks. Okay.
I just wanted to say, having sat in on the committee call yesterday and showing this document to everyone, that it does seem really daunting and really challenging and really overwhelming. But I do have absolute faith in our ability to see it through and to get there and to have a plan that makes going back to school successful. And I have nieces and nephews in Israel that are back in school, and places are doing it, and it's being done well. And I just don't want to kind of make that document and that visual being like the overwhelming kind of downer of the meeting, because I think that sometimes you have an array of options and it seems overwhelming, but then you start making plans and you're making decisions and the list comes smaller and the plan comes together, and we give everybody the time and the space that they need to learn the new and train to the new. And you know, I do believe that it will all come together. And so that I just wanted to, you know, put that out there.
Thanks. Yeah. Fran, you want to go ahead and just two or 3 minutes on your work with that very broad-based committee of, I don't know, it was like 50 people who've been exploring Schoology as an LMS option for us.
Yes, so thank you. So we've been actually looking at the idea of how do we build and select a system that's going to allow us to go from our emergency e-learning environment that we're in into a blended learning environment in whatever the situation or the scenarios that might actually come to bear in the fall. And we do have a very broad group that has now met 3 times. over 60 members that include parents, students, teachers at every level, leadership, coaches, coordinators, etc. We had our first meeting, it seems about 3 weeks ago, and we actually looked at what is it that we'd like to see in a management system as a tool to really help us get to where we'd like to be with online learning in the future when we have different scenarios. We went into breakout groups. So our, group of 60 became, 6 or 7 people that actually discussed what they'd like to see. We came out with a list of features that we thought would be the ones that we should focus on. Going into the second session, we looked at particular systems. Schoology was absolutely one of them. We also looked at something called Seesaw. And we talked about Google Classroom as well in terms of the needs that needed to be met and how could it meet it. Between the time that we met the second time and today, which was actually our third meeting, we had about 6 subcommittees meet separately and look at things like professional learning needs, support needs. At the elementary level, they engaged in several demonstrations of the tools to see what would really work for them. And we looked at curriculum and we looked at assessment, and all of those actually came to bear, and we basically put it all together today, and we had reporting out by all the subcommittees. And basically what came to bear was that we are going to go with Schoology at a pre-K-12 level. The elementary folks at both Miller Driscoll and Cider Mill, after looking at several demos and looking at the pluses and minuses, felt that with what Schoology had to offer, it would actually be something that would work for the littles. And the secondary would follow suit as well. We then basically have begun putting together what the support is going to be in terms of training and just the support over the summer and how we're going to shelter time. We're also looking at ways to make things a lot easier within the system. So just to give you a little bit of an idea of the why behind this, this is actually a system that involves every stakeholder. So in addition to the teacher working with the students, there's a parent portal. For the teacher, it integrates with PowerSchool, which makes it easier for teachers to actually be able to grade assignments, provide assessments, rubrics, and it goes into a grade book in Schoology that then actually talks to PowerSchool. PowerSchool bought Schoology in the beginning of this school year, so they're really actually part of the same system. And there are numerous features that are probably more specific to different age levels and different departments, but they do exist across all the different roles, including special ed staff that would have like an advisor role, be able to log in and be able to see all of their students and be able to see whether, they are actually, turning in homework, or how are they doing with assignments, be able to check in. So it actually fits the scale in terms of social emotional. There's a calendar kind of situation where executive functioning make it much easier. That consistency across the board in terms of seeing what is from one teacher to another is going to look a little bit more organized and consistent. And there's, like I said, there's a parent portal, which we haven't had. So parents will be able to log in and be able to see what's going on and actually toggle between one child and another. So there's a variety of different features and benefits. And we're just moving forward at this point to get the work done and to build the system that we can.
Yeah, I'm going to just add a couple more comments because this is a significant shift for us. And in the normal course of business, if all things were equal, we wouldn't have proceeded in the way that we did. And so, we've actually ruffled a lot of feathers, particularly among our middle school and high school staff as they've been kind of hearing about this work. And, I think it's important to acknowledge that as Fran was talking about the why, first of all, I think we've had, traditionally, as a community of educational practitioners, we've employed fairly democratic processes as we've entertained different changes. And so, we've sought a lot of stakeholder input. But in this emergency environment, it really just wasn't, the timing was such that we needed to make some decisions. And while we did have a broad base of people kind of thinking about it and weighing in, it wasn't necessarily all of the people that we would have engaged in the way that we would have engaged them traditionally. And so I don't want to understate the importance of that. We definitely stepped on some toes as part of this consideration, and that's really important to say out loud. I think as Fran was commenting, the why here is absolutely is critical. And as I've said, and we're committed to, we're not going to be in an emergency e-learning paradigm come what may in the fall. And so we have the time, we have the opportunity to be better and to do better. And so a lot of the questions on the teacher side of things was, why this tool and why now? And, isn't this like the worst possible time to make such a significant transition? And that's a really a fair statement and a fair worry to have, given what, people are already experiencing in terms of just trying to manage this environment. And so as we've tried to lay out for people, we think that Schoology really does check a lot of boxes, even for teachers who are, well immersed in Google Classroom, in terms of, what it can do to make life easier for lesson planning, the integration with the gradebook, for providing assessments. To Debbie's point and some of your commentary before about, the need for, some greater rigor as we normally would have, as well as some greater consistency. We think that this platform can really help us pretty far down that road. And then kind of going back to, the other comment that I made about, teaching and learning now being a team sport. As I have, participated in various webinars and learned about Schoology, I'm absolutely convinced, first as an educational leader, that this is a tool that will better support teachers, kids, and parents. But when I put my dad hat back on as, a dad of 5 kids in the system, and, really some days at my wit's end trying to keep track of their various assignments in Google Classrooms, this opportunity would give me a very efficient way to look at, what assignments are due, what assignments they've done, what their grades are. For teachers, there's a communication feature so they can communicate more directly with their classes of parents as well as their students. And so I think it really reinforces this idea of a team-based approach. And I think once we get into it, and as Fran was noting, our goal really is to meet all of our teachers where they are and provide the enough support to help make them feel comfortable as we're transitioning through the tool. But I feel pretty confident that on the other side of this, it's going to well serve all of us in achieving our goals.
Kevin, I have a few questions about it. So mainly I hear all the good to haves, but what is the main gap that you think Schoology will fill? If you could think one or two things.
There are several gaps, Mandy. I think one, on the teacher side of things, in terms of trying to manage the whole educative process. If we're in a remote environment, Schoology provides us the opportunity to really deliver content and instruction in a more efficient fashion. It also enables us the opportunity to assess students in a variety of manners against standards-based rubrics, in kind of traditional quiz or test formats. There is a lockdown browser feature within Schoology that we could access if we needed to. So I think just managing the whole education process is a big add. And we replicate that, but I don't think we get as close as we could in the current kind of Google Classroom-based environment. The second piece for me is really about students and parents. And so for students, if you've seen your own kids' Google Classrooms, number one, depending on how teachers organize it, it can look very different from one class to a next. And so students can, some students anyway, I think can have a lot of difficulty just tracking the links in the assignments, and then having to manage multiple classes. That can become difficult. I'll just again speak to my own kids' experience. We've had a lot of moments here over the last 2 months where they just miss things. And then as a parent, I don't have access to Google Classroom. I have to go in with them or as them to help them sort that out. And I don't have any other real opportunity unless I communicate, via email directly with the teacher to find out what they're missing. And that's often after the fact. So I think, the other real benefit here is the opportunity for parents, if they choose, to log in and they can see what those assignments are and when various events and activities are coming up. So we've heard recently, as we've asked our teachers to provide more synchronous learning opportunities, that some kids are simply opting out. I had an experience with a family yesterday where I don't think the parents were fully aware of what their child was and was not doing. And so, again, here is a really efficient way to provide information to parents proactively. So if they're able to get in and take a look at what's coming up, then they can work with their children at home to make sure that they show up to those synchronous activities, as well as make sure that they're submitting assignments on time. And then, they can also assess their progress through the examination and grades and whatnot.
Yeah, and I'm concerned about, you mentioned the ruffled feathers. So if you had to guess off the top of your head, what percentage of the staff is behind this right now?
I have no way of knowing that, honestly, because I haven't surveyed them individually. But I will say, we had representatives from Cider Mill and Miller Driscoll look at the platform. From some of those representatives, they really saw the potential. We got a lot of feedback, and the principals reported today that those two schools were ready to go. We had a conversation with the Middlebrook faculty a couple of days ago, and the questions really were, I think, number one, hey, why are you thinking about this now? And aren't you concerned about our capacity to make such a change? And then, number two, how is this better? Within that mix, I got quite a bit of feedback from folks who had been thinking about it and had decided that they thought they could do it with the right support, and they saw some benefits. We had a very constructive conversation with the high school IL team just before our meeting tonight. And again, lots of questions, and but my takeaway from that conversation with 14 or 15 of them is that they saw the opportunities and were willing to make the switch because they saw the potential.
And what is the PD going to look like? I'm sure it's actually a great. I was looking through it a little bit today, and I am concerned when I see things like Schoology, lockdown, browser hack, and how to break that's going to happen. I'm sure kids are going to find ways to do that. But I'm sure it's good, but it's the heavy lift for these faculty and for our students. So I'm just curious what you're thinking.
If I can,
hold on. I think we're all assuming, and again, I just would caution everybody not to generalize. And I would think we don't yet know what the lift is going to be. And so as we're getting into it, for some, it's definitely going to be a heavy lift for a variety of reasons. For others, it's not going to be a heavy lift at all. We had one of our high school folks, Eric Mendelson, who's just an outstanding teacher, and this year he's been functioning as the humanities coach. Fairly tech savvy, but also tuned into his staff members and his colleagues and what they need. And over the last week or so, he's been sandboxing it. And he shared with his colleagues tonight that he actually didn't think it was going to be such a tremendous lift because the platform is fairly intuitive, and there's so much integration opportunity with Google Drive. It's a question of learning the platform, but some of the activities in the way that they structure their Google Classroom isn't entirely dissimilar. So, I think in terms of our professional learning response, we'll always certainly set our goal that we want to be up and running for the return to school in the fall. There is a 6-hour training that all teachers ought to participate in, which would well acquaint them to the tool. And so, we're hoping to provide that to as many people as are willing and available over the course of the remaining days here in the spring. And then we'll have some opportunities to provide some, either introductory support or additional support during the summer, and then certainly some follow-on support as we come back to school more formally in August.
Got it.
Sorry, Fran, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's okay. I was just gonna say that we've had a couple of, like I said, we had students on the committee, and we had some that actually went in and thought that it was really quite intuitive. They had no issues with, navigating it, and came back and said that they felt that it was actually better than what they were using with Google Classroom, because it was much more consistent, and they were able to see things that, everything was actually laid out there and easy for them. So, and that was actually within like a day or two that we were able to show it to them. In addition, we're really trying very hard to make it so that our teachers are really well supported. As I was saying before, we're going to have a virtual help desk. We will have the training at the end of the year. We will have optional days over the summer and PD at the beginning of the year. We're going to do whatever we can to help, but the couple of teachers that have tried it out have found that because it integrates with the G Suite so well, they were able to bring things over, and it wasn't as difficult as it sounds.
And we're using it at Genesis now, right, Fran?
That's correct.
And are the Genesis teachers happy with it?
Very much.
I've gotten, I had a conversation with Tom Koch, one of the humanities teachers over there. And, he was very pleased with what he was able to do in service to students, in the way that he was able to organize his classes and deliver content. And he, spouted off, I think probably 10 or 12 bullet points of examples that he thought as teachers get more acquainted with the tool, they would find really user-friendly and beneficial and more efficient.
And then what's the cost, Kevin?
I think we're looking at somewhere around $30,000 all in. We already subscribe to
Power School.
Well, no, for Schoology, because we've been using Schoology as our platform to deliver asynchronous professional learning to teachers. And then, of course, we have the license for Genesis.
And can I just ask also, professional development, yes, but I also think in this new kind of team sport environment, there should be professional development for the parents and also for the students. Like, I know that if you have a class for kids about how they can use these tools and how it can work, and kind of integrate that into like the everyday classroom, then it makes them more independent when they're working at home, and it makes it a little bit more seamless. And for parents as well, having just kind of wrapped my head around Padlet, to be able to have those resources too, I think would also be very helpful to kind of help launch a September.
We've had conversations about creating almost like a digital, e-learning kind of boot camp for students as they go back in. We're creating self-paced modules. We'll have parent workshops as well. So we've been talking about, we've been talking to all the stakeholders about actually having those opportunities and scheduling it in as the year opens.
And are we still going to be using Google Classroom at all? Is this an either or are we using them together?
What happens with Google Classroom is that it really creates a drive of files. So we're still a G Suite district. That's not changing. We're still Google Apps. All of those files, instead of going into Google Classroom, will be going into Schoology. So it's all the same files, and it's all the same types of things that students are used to using. So we're taking the best of what we're doing with Classroom, and we're putting it into a system, which is actually a real system that enables us to incorporate things like Padlet and other things that we've been, really leveraging within a system that others can access, like the parents, et cetera. So it's not going away. It's just going to be incorporated within this new system.
Okay, and so will our teachers still have access to all of their stuff that is?
Absolutely. Yep. We're going to actually help them move all of that over into the system.
But even after they've moved over, it'll still be where they're used to seeing
Absolutely.
it and can still access it.
That drive that is created by Google Classroom is not going away. That's their created materials that will stay with them. And I think once we do the training and people are a little bit more acclimated to, you know, what each of these systems does, I think people will feel a lot more comfortable with it.
Okay. I mean, in fairness to our teachers, there's a lot going on right now, and to throw out a whole new platform at them, it's at the end of the school year, right before the summer is supposed to hit, and all the uncertainties in the fall. It's a lot to take in.
Sure.
And I think even as a parent, having a student who's, you know, kids who are used to what Google Classroom looks like, to now throw a different platform at them as well, and not knowing what's going to happen in the fall, and if we're going back for sure or not going back for sure, I think it just leads to more uncertainty and more stress.
Yeah.
So
I kind of think of it almost as the other way. To me, I kind of feel of it to some extent as a comforting thing, because it's a system that's going to wrap all these things together and, in my mind, make the time that I'm trying to manage, you know, my kids at, you know, in an at-home learning environment in a more smooth manner. So I'm looking at it kind of from a positive perspective, that it'll help integrate some of those classroom experiences and instructional needs that have been lacking in the e-learning emergency environment, and help really make for what I hope will be a more robust educational experience, and a more positive educational experience, you know, within the changing physical environments.
Yeah, and I certainly, you know, as I kind of opened up with in this part of the conversation, I wouldn't ever minimize the ask, and also wouldn't understate the current experiences of kids and families. And, you know, what I will tell you is, you know, from my point of view, as we've laid out what our goals are and what we don't want the future to look like, I'm convinced that this is a necessary step forward. And, you know, our teachers are absolutely, they're committed to their students. They're committed to doing what's best. And, you know, when called on, they always rise to the occasion. And as Fran has laid out, while it's not going to be easy, it'll be easier for some, harder for others. We're really committed to meeting them where they're at and delivering on an approach to teaching and learning that really that meets your own aspirations, that meets our aspirations, and better serves our children and families.
Well, it seems that, you know, that the easier route would be just to not start something new, because of all the reasons that you've listed and all the questions that you've heard from people, and some of the feedback I'm sure you've gotten from the staff. So what you're asking us as a board is to trust that in the long term, this is going to be stronger for everyone. I can't imagine you taking on this challenge unless you felt that strongly about it. So we need to trust that the long-term solution is better than the exhaustion at the end of the year. And then as a board, I think it's important that we reiterate Kevin's message that we really appreciate and thank the staff, because once again, here's another COVID-related Herculean task that, you know, they're being asked to confront and do. And so whatever we as a board can encourage in terms of support or time for teachers or whatever, if there are ways to shift time around that would help in some of this training and give teachers a breathing space, please do let us know. So thank you.
So we just, Maria, I wanted to just give her 3 or 4 minutes to give us a very top line update, the goals that she's sharing.
Sure. Good evening. I've been participating on 3 of the subcommittees, one focused on staffing, one focused on developing a system of coordination and communication, and one focused on wellness for staff, students, and families. And I think as we share out, not just tonight, but in the weeks ahead, everyone will recognize that there are a lot of overlapping goals across each of these plans. And so we've begun our planning, but we also recognize that we're going to be working with Kevin's subcommittee and Fran's subcommittee, and you know, there are a lot of resources that we'll need to share, and there's a lot of coordination that we'll all need to do. Just to give you some highlights for the staffing subcommittee, we've been considering the possibility of multiple scheduling and instructional delivery models. We've been looking at what we would need to do related to staff availability for these different models. For example, one of the things that we've been thinking about is staff whose children may not be in school next year. You know, there may be, we're hearing that the decision making is going to be left to individual school districts. And if that's the case, our school district may be open and other school districts may be closed. And so we may have staff that have limited availability because their children are at home. They may have a complete lack of availability. So we've been thinking about that. We also have to think about safety protocols, training, and resources like PPE that Andrea talked about earlier. Thinking about coordination and communication, which is a subcommittee that Ann Kelly Lenz and Eric also serve on, so I'll invite them to chime in at any point. We've been looking at the need for pandemic response teams in each building, and we feel like we're well positioned for that because we have emergency operations teams in each building, and we also have the incident command structure in place in each building. We've also been thinking about communication protocols to streamline and enhance communications to staff, students, and families. And then finally, from the wellness perspective, we've been working on an overall outreach and wellness plan for our staff, students, and families. We've begun gathering surveys, needs assessments, and screenings to determine which instruments are going to be the best ones to leverage, both now over the summer and perhaps throughout the school year. And then we've also begun collecting resources and considering ways to share out those resources with staff, students, and families. We've had several meetings already. There's a lot of work underway. There's certainly a lot more work to be done. But I think we're off to a good start. And I would welcome Ann, Kelly Lenz, and Eric to share if they have anything else from the coordination and communication subcommittee that we've been working on.
No, Maria, I think you covered it very well.
Okay.
Maria,
Yes.
what is the recruiting process going to look like?
Well, the recruiting process, we've posted a few positions. We don't have all positions posted because obviously we're waiting on the budget process to be finalized. We will have online recruiting. We will have online interviews. It's similar to what we have in place now. We still have all of our protocols in place. One thing that's going to be considerably different is just the opportunity to have teachers on site teaching students directly. We've talked about how we might make adjustments to that part of the process because we do recognize that it is a critical part of the process. And one of the things that we have considered is having the prospective candidates present lessons, present lesson plans, walk us through those lessons, walk us through assessments. We've considered the opportunity to have them work maybe on a Zoom call with either the administrators or a smaller group of volunteers. We don't have a lot of open positions right now, and perhaps that's a thing to celebrate because, this is a very unique hiring season. We also have quite a few candidates for each of the positions that we have available because I think all school districts are in a similar position. We don't have a lot of school districts that are hiring right now. So I think we have good protocols in place. We have our interview formats that we're going to be using. It's all just going to be done virtually. And what I see as being, the biggest change is just how we will deal with demonstration lessons, which is, phase 2 of the interview process. And that's after we've done our initial interviews and we decide to invite candidates back. We know that we will continue to have a second level interview. We're just going to be modifying it somewhat.
Okay. You feel comfortable that we're prepared and ready and we.
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
good.
Yes.
Thank
Mhm.
Thanks.
Debbie, that's it for our update.
No more goals? Just being a little facetious. Good God. All right, no, thanks to all of you.
Yeah, just, if I may,
go
one quick
ahead.
question. Kevin, is there any kind of a summary document or white paper on Schoology that you could send to us to get for?
I asked her, yeah, Debbie made a similar request a few days ago, so she's gathered just simple documents and videos that you all can take a look at to acquaint yourselves.
Great, that would be good. Thank you so much. Okay, good, thank you.
Yeah, okay. Are they, sorry, I've got to find out where I am on the agenda. All right, we have no action items tonight. There's some future meetings listed, and there are more. Comments from the public?
Yes, there is a comment from the public. As a voice for the Wilton High School community, we would like to acknowledge the monumental task that the graduation committee has seen through these past 5 weeks in trying to plan an event of meaning and tradition. The students, faculty, and parents serving on this committee have held this responsibility with great sensitivity and inclusion. Senior year is a pinnacle event in our students' lives, for their families, and for the Wilton community. As such, we urge the district administration to ensure that events for younger grade transitions are not substantially similar to that for WHS seniors. Because of restrictions, the options are limited, understandably. However, younger students will have their chance as they move through the district. So much has been lost for the 2020 WHS seniors that it will never be recovered. That to give them something unique and special is essential at this time. Thank you for your consideration. WHS PTSA officers, Lorianne Somier, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right, Laura Rowley, Maria Wilcox, Beth Flavin, Savit Constantine, and Nicola Davies.
Thank you. As with all public comment, the board does not engage directly or answer directly, but please be assured that we listen carefully, and your comments will obviously have been shared with the superintendent and the leadership team here. So thank you for those points. I appreciate them very much. Are there other public comments? All right, then seeing that we finished the agenda and there are no more public comments, this meeting is adjourned, and Kevin, you will let us know if we need another board meeting next week. We obviously have it calendared, but it's tentative, and you'll let us know. All right, so this meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.